Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. Chapter 1. My Parents and Early Life. The characteristic feature of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and concomitant disciple guru relationship. My own path led to Christ like sage. His beautiful life was chiseled for the ages. He was one of the greatest masters who are India's truest wealth. Emerging in every generation, they have bulwarked their land and against the fate of ancient Egypt and Babylonia. I find my earliest memories covering the anachronistic features of the previous incarnation. Clear recollections came to me of a distant life in which I had been yogi. Amid the Himalayan snows, these glimpses of the past by some dimensionless link also afforded me a glimpse for the future. I still remember the helpless humiliations of infancy. I was resentfully conscious of being unable to walk and to express myself freely. Prayerful surges arose within me as I realized my bodily impotence. My strong emotional life was mentally expressed in words of many languages. Amid the inward confusion of tongues, I gradually became accustomed to hearing the Bengali syllables of my people. The beguiling scope of an infant's mind, adultly considered to be limited to toys and toys. Psychological ferment and my unresponsive body brought me to many obstinate crying spells. I recall the general family bewilderment at my distress. Happier memories too crowd in on me. My mother's caresses and my first attempt at lip sync phrase and toddling step. These early triumphs are usually forgotten quickly and are yet a natural basis of self confidence. My far reaching memories are not unique. Many yogis are known to have retained their self consciousness with, without interruption by the dramatic transition to and from life and death. It may be solely a body, its loss indeed ends his identity. But if prophets down the millennium spake with truth, man is essentially a soul, incorporeal and omnipresent. Although odd and clear memories of infancy are not extremely rare. During travels in numerous lands, I have heard very clear early recollections from the lips of veracious men and women. I was born on January 5, 1893, in Gorakhpur in northern eastern India, near the Himalaya mountains. There, my first 8 years were passed. We were 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. I, Mukund Lal Ghosh, was the second son and fourth child. My father and mother were Bengalis of the Kshatriya caste. Both were blessed with a saintly nature. Their mutual love, tranquil and dignified, never expressed itself frivolously. A perfect parental harmony was the calm center for the revolving tumult of 8 young lives. Father Bhagwati Charan Ghosh was kind, grave, at times stern. Loving him dearly, we children yet observed a certain reverential distance. An outstanding mathematician and logician, he was guided principally by his intellect. But mother was queen of hearts and taught us only through love. After her death, father displayed more of his inner tenderness. I noticed then that his gaze often seemed to be metamorphosed into my mother's case. In my mother's presence, we children made an early bittersweet acquaintance with the scriptures. Mother would resourcefully summon from the Mahabharata and Ramayana suitable tales to meet exigencies of discipline. On these occasions, chastisement and instructions were hand in hand. As a gesture of respect for father, in the afternoons, mother would dress us children carefully to welcome home from the office. He held in a position similar to that of a vice president in one of the India's largest companies, Bengali Nagpur Railway. His work was involved traveling. Our family lived in several cities during my childhood. Mother held an open hand toward the needy. Father was kindly disposed, but his respect for the law and order extended to the budget. One fortnight mother spent in feeding the poor more than father's monthly income. All I ask, please, father said, is that you keep your charities within a reasonable limit. Even a gentle rebuke from her husband was grievous to mother. Not hinting to the children at any disagreement, she ordered an hackney carriage. Goodbye, I am going away to my mother's home. Ancient ultimatum. We broke into astounded lamentations. Our maternal uncle arrived opportunely. He whispered to father some sage counsel, garnered no doubt from the ages. After father had made a few conciliatory remarks, mother happily dismissed the cab. Thus ended the only trouble I ever noticed between my parents. But I recall a characteristic discussion. Please give me 10 rupees for a hapless woman who have just arrived at the house. Mother's smile had its own persuasion. Why 10 rupees? One is enough. Father added a justification. When my father and grandparents died suddenly, I had my first experience of poverty. My only breakfast before waking miles to my school was a small banana. Later at the university, I was in such need that I applied to a wealthy judge for aid of 1 rupee per month. He declined, remarking that even 1 rupee is important. How bitterly you recall the denial of that rupee. Mother's heart had an instant logic. Do you want this woman also to remember painfully your refusal of 10 rupees when she need urgently? You win. With the immemorial gesture of vanquished husbands, he opened his wallet. Here is a 10 rupee note. Give it to her with my goodwill. Father tended first to say no to any new proposal. His attitude towards the stranger who so readily had won mother's sympathy was an example of customary caution. An aversion to instant acceptance is really honoring the principle of due reflection. I always found father reasonable and even balanced in his judgment. If I could bolster up my numerous request with one or two good arguments, he would invariably put within my reach and the coveted goal, whether a vacation trip or a new motorcycle. Father was a strict disciplinarian to his children in their early 8 years, but his attitude toward himself was truly Spartan. He never visited the theater, for instance, but sought his recreation in various spiritual practices and in the reading Bhagavad Gita. Shunning all luxuries, he would cling to one old pair of shoes until they were useless. His sons bought automobiles after they into popular use, but father was content with the trolley a car for his daily ride to the office. Several years after the father had retired on a pension, an accountant from England came to India to examine the books of Bengal Nagpur Railway. The amazed investigator discovered that father had never applied for overdue bonuses. He did the work of 3 men. The accountant told the company he has rupees $125,000, 41,000 250 owing to him as back compensation. The treasurer sent father a check for that amount. My parent thought so little about that matter that he forgot to mention it to the family. Much later, he was questioned by my youngest brother, Vishnu, who had noticed the large deposit on the bank statement. Why be elated my material profit? Father replied. The one who pursue a goal of even mindedness is neither jubilant with gain nor depressed by loss. He knows that man arrives penniless in this world and who departs without a single rupee. Early in their married life, my parents became disciples of great master Lahiri Mahasaya of Banaras. This association strengthened father's naturally ascetical temperament. Mother once made me a remarkable admission to my eldest sister Roma. You, father, and I sleep together, them as man and wife, only once a year for the purpose of having children. Father met Lahiri Mahasaya. Father met Lahari Mahasaya through Abhinash Babu, an employee of a branch line of Bengal Nagpur Railway in Gorakhpur. Abhinash Babu instructed my young ears with engrossing tales of many Indian saints. He invariably concluded with a tribute to the super glories of his own Guru. Did you ever hear of the extraordinary circumstances under which your father became a disciple of Mahasaya? It was on a lazy summer vacation as Abinash and I sat together in the compound of my home. Then he put this intriguing question. I shook my head with a smile of an anticipation. Years ago, before you were born, I asked my superior officer, your father, to give me a week's leave from my office duties in order to visit my guru in Banaras. Your father ridiculed my plan. Are you going to become a religious fanatic? He inquired. Concentrate on your office work if you want to forge ahead. Sadly, walking home along a woodland path that day, I met your father in a palanquin. He dismissed his and conveyance and fell into step beside me, seeking to console me. He pointed out the advantages of striving for worldly success, but I heard him listlessly. My heart was repeating, Lahari Mahasya, I cannot live without seeing you. Our path took us to the edge of the tranquil field, where the rays of the late afternoon sun were crowning the tail ripple of the wild grass. We paused in admiration. There in the field, only few yards from us, the form of my great guru suddenly appeared. Bhagwati, you are too hard on your employee. His voice was resonant in our astounded ears. He vanished as mysteriously as he had come. On my knees, I was exclaiming, Lahari Mahasya, Lahari Mahasya. For a few moments, your father was motionless with a stupefaction. Abhinash, not only do I give you leave, but I give myself leave to start for Banaras tomorrow. I must know this great Lahari Mahasya who is able to materialize himself at will in order to intercede for you. I'll take my wife and ask this master to initiate us in his spiritual path. Will you guide us to him? Of course, joy filled me at the miraculous answer to my prayer and the quick, favorable turn of events. The next evening, your parents and I entered for Banaras. Reaching there on the following day, we took a horse cart for some distance. Then had to talk through a narrow lanes to my guru's secluded home. Entering his little parlor, we bowed before the master and eloped in his habitual lotus posture. He blinked his piercing eyes and leveled them on your father. Bhagwati, you are too hard on your employee. His words were the same as those he had used 2 days before in the grassy field. He added, I am glad that you have permitted Abhinash to visit me and that you and your wife have accompanied him. To their joy, he initiated your parents in spiritual practice of Kriya Yoga. Your father and I, as brother disciples, have been close friends since the memorable day of vision. Lahari Mahasya took a definite interest in your own birth. Your life shall surely be linked with his own. The Master's blessing never fails. Lahari Mahasya left this world shortly after I had entered it. His picture in an ornate frame always graced our family altar in the various cities to which father was transferred by his office. Many a morning and evening found mother and me meditating before an improvised shrine, offering flowers dipped in the fragrant sandalwood paste with the frank incense and Mira, as well as our united devotions. We honored the divinity that had found full expression in Lahari Mahasya. His picture had a surpassing influence over my life. As I grew, the thought of the Master grew with me. In meditation, I would often see his photographic image emerge from its small frame and taking a living form sit before me. When I attempted to touch the feet of his luminous body, it would change and again become the picture. As childhood slipped into boyhood, I found Lahari Mahasya transformed in my mind from a little image scribbled in a frame to living, enlightening presence. I frequently prayed to him in the moments of trial or confusion, finding within me a solacing direction. At first, I grieved because he was no longer physically living. As I began to discover his secret omnipresence, I lamented no more. He had often written to those of his disciples who were over anxious to see him. Why come to view my flesh and bones when I am ever within the range of your Kutushatha spiritual sight? At a at about the age of 8, I was blessed with a wonderful healing through the photograph of Lahari Mahasya. This experience gave intensification to my love. While at our family estate in Ichapur, Bengal, I was stricken with the Asiatic cholera. My life was despaired of. The doctors could do nothing. At my beside, mother frantically motioned me to look at Lahari Mahasya's picture on the wall above my head. Bowed to him mentally. She knew I was too feeble even to lift my hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared. I gazed at this photograph and saw there a blinding light enveloping my body and the entire room. My nausea and other controllable symptoms disappeared. I was well. At once I felt strong enough to bend over and touch mother's feet in appreciation of her immeasurable faith in her Guru. Mother pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light had healed my son. I realized that she too had witnessed the luminous blaze through which I had instantly recovered from an usually fatal disease. One of my most precious possessions is that some photograph given to my father, my Lahari Mahasya himself. It carries a holy vibration. The picture had miraculous origin. I heard the story from the father's brother disciple Kali Kumar Roy. It appears that the master had an aversion to being photographed. Over his protest, a picture was once taken of him and group of devotees, including Kali Kumar Roy. It was an amazed photographer who discovered that the plate, which he had clear images of all disciples, revealed nothing more than a blank space in the center where he had reasonably expected to fill the outlines of Lahari Mahasya. The phenomenon was widely discussed. A student who was an expert photographer, Gangadhar Babu, posted that the fugitive figure would not escape him. The next morning, as Guru sat in lotus posture on a wooden bench with a screen behind him, Gangadhar Babu arrived with his equipment, taking every precaution for success. He greedily exposed 12 plates. On each one he soon found the imprint of the wooden bench and screen, but once again the master's form was missing. With tears and shattered pride, Gangadhar Babu sought out his guru. It was many hours before Lahari Masya broke his silence with the pregnant comment. I am spirit. Can your camera reflect the omnipresent invisible? I see it cannot. But holy sir, I lovingly desire a picture of your bodily temple. My vision has been narrow until of today. I did not realize in you that the spirit fully dwells. Come then tomorrow morning, I'll pose for you. Again the photographer focused his camera, this time the scared figure, not cloaked with mysterious imperceptibility, was sharp on the plate. The master never posed for another picture, at least I have seen none. The photograph is reproduced in this book. Lahari Mahasya's hair, fair features of universal caste, hardly suggest to what race he belonged. The joy of court communion is slightly revealed in his enigmatic smile, his eye half open to denote a nominal interest in the outer world, as also half closed, indicating his absorption in the inner bliss. Oblivious of his poor lures on the earth, he was fully awake at all times to the spiritual problems of seekers who approached of his for his bounty. Shortly after my healing through the potency of the Guru's picture, I had influential spiritual vision. Sitting on my bed one morning, I fell into deep reverie. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes? This probing thought came powerfully into my mind. An immense flash of light at once manifested to my inner gaze. Divine shapes of saints sitting in meditation posture in mountain caves formed like miniature cinema pictures of the large screen of radiance within my forehead. Who are you? I spoke aloud. We are the Himalayan yogis. The celestial response is too difficult to describe. My heart was thrilled. Ah, I long to go to the Himalayas and become like you. The vision vanquished, but the silvery beams expanded in ever widening circles to infinity. What is the wondrous glow? I am Ishvara, I am light. The voice was as murmuring clouds. I want to be one with thee. Out of the slow dwindling of my divine ecstasy, I salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. He is eternal, ever new joy. This memory persisted long after the day of rapture. Another early collection is outstanding and literally so, for I bear the scar to this day. My elder sister Oma and I were seated in the early morning under a neem tree in our Gorakhpur compound. She was helping me in my study of a Bengali primer. What time I could spare my gaze from the nearby parrots eating ripe margosa fruit. Uma complained of a boil on her leg and fetched a jar of ointment. I smeared a bit of the salve on my forearm. Why do you use medicine on a healthy arm? Well, sister, I feel like I am going to have a boil tomorrow. I am testing your ointment on the spot where the boil will appear. You little liar. Sister, don't call me a liar until you see what happens in on the morning. Indignation filled me. Uma, unimpressed, thrice repeated her taunt. An adamant resolution sounded in my voice as I made slow reply. By the power of will in me, I say that tomorrow I shall have a fairly large boil in this exact place on my arm, and your boil shall swell to twice its present size. Morning found me with a stalwart boil in the indicated spot. The dimensions of Uma's boil has doubled. With a shriek, my sister rushed to my mother. Mokananda has become a necromancer. Gravely, mother instructed me never to use the power of words for doing harm. I have always remembered her counsel and followed it. My boil was surgically treated. A noticeable scar left by the doctor's incision is present today. On my right forearm is a constant reminder of the powers in man's sheer world. Those simple and apparently harmless phrases to Uma, spoken with deep concentration, had possessed sufficient hidden force to explode like bombs and to produce definite through injurious effects. I understood later that the exploitation explosive vibratory power in speech could be wisely directed to from free one's life from difficulties and thus operate without scar or rebuke. Our family moved to Lahore in Punjab, therefore, I acquired a picture of the Divine Mother in the form of Goddess Kali. I sanctified a small informal shrine on the balcony of our home. An unequivocal conviction came over me that fulfillment would crown or any of my prayers uttered in the sacred spot. Standing there with Uma one day, I watched two boys flying kites over the roofs of two buildings that were separated from our house by an extremely narrow line. Why are you so quiet? Uma pushed me playfully. I am just thinking how wonderful is that Divine Mother gives me whatever I ask. I suppose she would you give you those two kites. My sister laughed derisively. Why not? I begin silent prayers for their possession. Matches are played in India with the kites whose strings are covered with the glue and ground glass. Each player attempts to sever the string held by his opponent. A fleet kite sails over the roofs. There is a great fun in catching it. As Uma and I were on a roofed recessed balcony, it seems impossible that a loosed kite could come into our hands. Its strings would naturally dangle over the roof. The player across the lane began their match. One string was cut. Immediately, the kite floated in my direction. Owing to sudden abatement of the breeze, the remained stationary for a moment, during which its string became firmly entangled with the cactus plant on the top of the opposite house. A long, perfect loop was formed for my seizure. I handed the prize to Uma. It was just an extraordinary accident and not an answer to your prayer. If the other kite comes to you, then I shall believe. Sister's dark eyes conveyed more amazement than her words. I continued my prayers with intensity. A forcible tug by the other player resulted in the abrupt loss of his kite. It headed toward me, dancing in the wind. My helpful assistant, the cactus plant, again secured the kite string in the necessary loop by which I could grasp it. I presented my second trophy to Uma. Indeed, Divine Mother, indeed, Divine Mother listens to you. This is all too uncanny for me. Sister bolted away like a frightened fawn.